This podcast features opinions of the Atlanta CTSA faculty and guest faculty on various topics in research ethics. The opinions these individuals express are their own and not necessarily those of Emory University, the Georgia Institute of Technology, or Morehouse School of Medicine. Furthermore, nothing in this podcast should be understood or taken as legal advice. This podcast is copyrighted by Emory University, 2016.
Hello, I'm Jason Borenstein, and I am the Director of Graduate Research Ethics Programs and Associate Director of the Center for Ethics and Technology at the Georgia Institute of Technology. I also represent Georgia Tech as its ethics faculty for the ACTSI ethics program.
And my name is John Banja. Welcome to this podcast on mentoring. I'm a medical ethicist at the Center for Ethics at Emory, and I direct the Atlanta Clinical and Translational Science Institute's ethics program. And our guest today is Dr. Mary DeLong. Dr. DeLong is Assistant Dean and past Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Education at Emory and Director of the Postdoc Ethics course. She directs career development and community events for the 550-plus postdoctoral fellows of the School of Medicine. And Mary, prior to coming to Emory, you worked at the NIH, directing over 500 graduate students in partnerships with universities throughout the world, and at Johns Hopkins, where you were also in deanship positions and involved in graduate training programs. At Hopkins and Emory universities, you did laboratory research on control of protective enzymes in cancer chemo prevention.
Hello, thank you, John and Jason. Yes, that's right. My career has been a mix of bench science and administrative work.
So, Mary, our topic for this particular podcast is mentoring, which is one of the most important responsibilities any researcher has, especially faculty at a research institution. And yet, it's probably safe to say that the quality of mentoring varies quite widely, not just from organization or institution to institution, but within particular institutions and departments.
Yes, that's quite right. It's critically important that the faculty, staff, and others in leadership roles have good mentoring skills. We often assume that because someone is a successful researcher, then he or she is automatically a good mentor. But we have come to know that is not always true.
Indeed. So, Mary, tell us some of the complaints that you have heard from mentees about their mentors or their close advisors.
Well, some of them are pretty well known, John. As you know, advisors or mentors and their graduate students and postdocs have a broad variety of personalities that sometimes lead to problems in communication. This does not in itself lead to bad mentoring, but when a mentor is rude or overly critical, it can be very damaging to the trainee's self-respect and self-confidence, and the trainee begins to believe that he or she cannot be successful in science. In the opposite corner is the mentor who is overly friendly, producing boundary issues. This mentor becomes too friendly with mentees or just engages in behaviors that aren't appropriate. However, probably the biggest complaint is that mentoring is not really happening. The mentor is unavailable for various reasons, such as writing grants, or he or she is very successful and often traveling to give lectures. These mentors just want to do their own work and not advise or give direction. When they attempt to give direction or advice, they do so poorly. The suggestions, directions, or feedback are vague, and the mentee can't implement them because they have not been carefully considered or communicated.
So one that I hear a lot is when the mentee finds himself or herself having to work on projects in the lab that he or she didn't sign up for.
Yes, and that's not too uncommon. The mentor, who could be a PI or lab director, finds out that the student or postdoc is very good at a particular technique, a piece of software, or running a particular test, and so assigns the trainee to assist or do for others the particular technique or research work. This service or support role can be assigned for persons in the lab or collaborations with the lab. Pretty soon, this postdoc or graduate student has to set aside all of his or her own important research projects and only do the bidding of the PI.
Which brings us to a very important point, and that is the ultimate goal of a postdoc, and therefore the ultimate goal of the type of mentor-mentee relationship in assisting and supporting the postdoc in the search for a good job. It isn't only doing good research and publishing good papers, although that's an important part of it, of course. It's ultimately getting a good job.
Correct, Jason. And you might say that that goal defines the ethical dimensions of the mentor-mentee relationship as it applies to the postdoc, not necessarily to the graduate student entirely, since their careers are still in formation, but for the postdoc definitely. For a postdoc, and then somewhat for a graduate student, the mentor has two major obligations. The first is to train in independent research, and the second is to help the trainee launch a successful science career in the field of his or her choice. If the mentor forgets about the career development role, then he or she just uses the postdoc for the ends of the lab or a funding stream. If that's the way the mentor is using the mentee, then that's very disturbing and unethical. That's not what the postdoc signed up for.
This concludes part 1 of this podcast on mentoring. Other podcasts and ethics materials are available at the ACTSI website at www.actsi.org.